but I had my last one-on-one with them, and they had started to really tack on. So the emails actually started becoming in person and started to tell me, like, I miss the old Michaelangelo. I miss the way that you were. Now it just seems like you're just showing up to work so unhappy, and it shows in everything that you're doing. And I think that, we're going to have to revisit our pay structure and in terms of this role and position. And I had asked a couple of follow-up questions with that in terms of, do you mean that I'm going to be demoted, or do you think that this role is going to be eliminated? And she said, I don't think you're going to be demoted or eliminated because we need this, but really we're going to consider what your bonus structure is going to be, because you're really just not the person we thought you would be.
Hello and welcome to Growing Through It, your go-to podcast for real leadership stories. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. In every episode, you'll hear straight talk from leaders who face their own challenges. We'll dive into those whoops moments and the insights that followed. This podcast is about the lessons that refine us, shared to help you confidently lead in your own style. Whether you're looking to steer your team towards success or just seeking a spark of inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's grow through it together. Michaelangelo, welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Well, let's set some context here. So I like to, before we go into a story, which your story is going to be from your past, how many years have you been leading up to this point?
About 12 years. So I've been a people manager, for a better part of 12 years of that.
So you currently lead people right now, correct?
Yes.
Got it. But take us back. Where does this story in your leadership journey begin?
So I was with the organization for a bit in a manager role, and I had the opportunity to take on a new role as a director. And when I say new role, not just new to me, but new to the organization. And so I was able to kind of build the foundations and kind of build that up. And, I was honored by my leader at that time, who had the faith and trust to give me more responsibility and really let me lead and grow that department as well as myself into something bigger than what it was. So
let me just, I'm sorry, I'm stopping you early. I just need to I have too many questions already. So you were currently working for a manager, and you were a manager working for somebody, and you were leading people, and then your current manager said, Michaelangelo, you're doing such a great job. Here's a new position. So going to move you out of your role and promote you into a director role.
Essentially.
Did I get that right?
Yes. So It was kind of a simultaneous growth. So my leader was growing and taking on new business units and kind of forming herself as an executive director / vice president kind of role. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't necessarily backfilling for her, but I was essentially taking on what I was doing as a unit in that division and growing that into its own category and reporting up to her. So she would be gaining more units.
Okay. Did you keep the people you were leading and get more, or did you just get a whole new team?
I kept some and gained some, and some went into a different unit.
Gotcha. Okay. So how was that? I mean, that must have been exciting, getting a promotion and getting to be a director. And how did that go?
It was absolutely exciting. It was a little nerve-wracking. I had to find some self-guidance as well as seek out some mentors to make sure that this was the right path, and I was ready for it. I don't know if most people, or if it was just me moving into a director level, feel unready for it. But I definitely was excited for it. So, and then I had the comfortability of people that I already knew.
Gotcha. So when you got the opportunity to be put into a director role, did you say that you kind of thought about it before? You didn't just say, yes, hell yeah, let's go. Like, did you have to sit and think if is this the right choice for me?
I said hell yes in my head, but I knew that I had to not say yes right away. Again, I had to get my ducks aligned to make sure I wanted to set myself up for success, especially because this was in itself a new role and something that I knew how to do, but I wouldn't necessarily still have the same support from my leader because this was a whole new thing. And so it was just making sure that I felt comfortable enough to take this on and had the bandwidth.
So how did it go? You get into your new role. You've done you got your ducks in a row. You've checked everything. How did it go?
Started off okay. It was a whole kind of a honeymoon phase of, congratulations, everyone's excited. Let's get you a little bit more warmed up. Let's give you a little bit more of a scope of what you should be doing. But at the same time, there was a lot of ambiguity because, again, brand new role. And so it was a whole lot of, you need to build this, figure it out, and let us know how it goes. So the beginning was kind of exciting because it was like, I'll build this. And so starting to gain resources and starting to build stuff up. When I started asking for just a little bit more support, it was taken well until it wasn't taken on well. It was a really weird turning moment. And I can't put my finger on it, but I can kind of guess when it was. But I started to get a little more comfortable and a lot more confident and a lot more stable in what needed to be done. And so I had taken it on, doing it, saying what needs to be, the direction we needed to take. Everyone, for the most part, liked that. But my leaders seemed to start questioning some of my decisions, which was fine because, again, I am one to take direction well, but you gave me something vague, I do what I do, and then ask me what I'm doing. I am happy enough to tell you what I'm doing. Until she started to tell me that I was combative. And I had to take a step back because maybe I was. Sometimes I have a big personality. And so I did. I took a moment. I asked my wife about some of my responses. She is, she's been a people manager for so long. She's been in operations. She's somebody that I rely heavily on to ask advice of other than my mentor. And she agreed that my answers were fine and the way that I approached things were fine, especially at my level, to try to, assert myself. But my leader started to tell me that I was disrespectful and started telling me that I have approached her wrong and that it makes her uncomfortable and that I need to review how people see me. She made it more of a general consensus versus a me versus her, because then she started saying, yeah, other people are telling me that you're a little aggressive in your approach. And that really took me back because I didn't change my approach at all. I had just become more confident in being able to make executive decisions.
So you said a few things that I want to just tap into. One you said is like you were asking for support, and then you also said that I don't know if it was a specific moment or if there was just, you noticed, was there a shift? Like, did you notice, like, when did the tides turn on you? Because previously you had a lot of support. It sounds like you're going into a role with a lot of ambiguity and with the direction, correct me if I'm wrong, to figure it out, right? Like, that's your role, figure out this new role, keep us apprised on what's going on, but that's it. So when did you notice things shift?
I think when I stopped asking for support, I think the asking for support part kept it connected, I don't know how to really phrase it, but made it feel like, I was still reporting to her. And I never stopped reporting to her. But really, I think for her sake, made her feel, again, we had that peer manager kind of relationship. And I think when I started to take on more of an assertive role and more of I don't really need help anymore. I'm going to make decisions. I'm going to lead how I believe we should lead. I think that was a turning point for her, and I think I don't know. I can't, again, put my finger on it, but that's when she really started treating me a little bit differently, in the sense that she said that my personality was no longer a match. And I remember receiving an email in the dead of night, and an interaction we had. Somebody was talking. We were together at a table. Somebody had come up to us, asked a question, and I jumped right in to answer the question. And I remember her. She walked away, And in the middle of the night, she had sent me an email that had quite literally said, I have never had someone interrupt me like that. And I just want to tell you for the future, that doesn't look good as a leader to interrupt another person. And I couldn't believe it because I don't, I still stand by, I didn't interrupt her. I may have jumped in really quickly, but it baffled me. And from then on, a lot of the conversations were passive aggressive and were trying to, for a lack of a professional wording, put me into my place. And it was disheartening because as I started to feel comfortable in my role as a leader, I started to now question and begin to have self-doubt in doing that.
Yeah. So like when she would write you an email like that, how do you respond? Or what was the outcome she wanted? Was it just, I need to get this off my chest? Was there a call to action? Like, don't do it again. Like, what did she expect from you? And second question is, did you respond? What did you do with those type of emails?
There was no specific call to action, rather than, I'm just letting you know. That's how she always signed them off. I just want to let you know. So when it first started that way, and it's funny when I say this because you won't believe it, there have been a string of emails of this type of passive aggressiveness. When it first started, I did respond, and I would respond very humbly as if I really appreciate that feedback. That's not how I intended it. I apologize. I had always taken the stance of, you're right, I'm wrong. I must have interrupted you. So absolutely, I'm so sorry. I won't ever do that again. But it started to get a little bit more personal and a little bit more nitpicky. One of the emails had literally said I had completed a training course in a new system that we were utilizing, and I received a kind of like a professional certificate. You know how a lot of that things like to do that. So it awarded me with a professional certificate. So I was a certified professional in that system that we are migrating over to. I had put that onto LinkedIn, and she had reached out to me in email and said, I think it's really strange that you would say that you are a certified professional when you've never used this system. And I just was like, I was like, that's my personal business. I mean, I get it. LinkedIn's more professional, and I'm connected to her. Anyone can see whatever you want to see, but it's almost like, get off of my social media if you don't like what I say.
Well, that's what the point of a certificate is. I get trained in things. I put it because you get the certification. That's the whole point. That's what they want you to do. That's what you should be doing.
Right.
So that's. And so did you respond to that one? So it sounds like you responded at first, and then over the course of time, you just stopped responding.
Yeah, that was towards the point of where it didn't dignify a response.
Right. So how did this impact, like, I guess at what point in your tenure in that new leadership position, at what point month-wise did you start seeing that? And then how did it start impacting your leadership? I mean, you're trying to lead this team. You're trying to get things to happen. And if you have your boss not supporting you and potentially sabotaging you, how did that affect your leadership?
So it started about 6 months into the role, and it went on for a little bit. So it definitely impacted me. Like I said at the beginning, it made me question myself. It made me question my ability to lead. It made me question myself as a person. Because I had never wanted to be that executive who was a hard ass or was seen as somebody that bullied their way into anything. And so that type of wording at the beginning really made me think, wow, did I let power get to my head? Am I that type of person? Eventually, through a lot of soul searching, with colleagues of mine, with my mentor, with my wife, it helped rebuild me back up. So I think in that part of the lull, I had a lot of self-doubt, which made me a weaker leader. I think I didn't feel comfortable answering some questions. I didn't feel comfortable being my authentic self, which if you don't show up to work authentically, you're putting up a facade, which is emotionally draining, which made work and home a lot different because I would just be drained after work. I'd be home and just unhappy with what I was doing in terms of where I was, not what I was doing. And then I started taking on less. I had really put myself into a bubble of, well, I don't want to rock the boat, so I almost fell back into a individual contributor moment, or really went back to what I was just doing as a manager and kind of foregoing some of the extra responsibilities I'd taken on because I wasn't sure if I should, if it would be received well. And so it really was a heartache. Until, again, I started getting a little more comfortable again. My colleagues were like, no, you're doing fine. Push on. We love what you're doing. You're making an impact. And so that really helped me, again, get a little bit better. But then the passive aggressiveness just turned into aggressiveness.
Oh, so that's what you said it started around 6 months. And then when did you notice that escalation in behavior?
Probably 3 or 4 months after that.
And then what point? Like, what were they taking it even further? Like, give me an example of what was going on.
So it started turning into nitpicking my one-on-ones. So when I would have my one-on-ones with her, it turned into a lot of really minor things, like I didn't sign off on something I should sign off on, or I'm going over budget when I didn't have a budget yet, or I was not holding certain team members accountable that I should be, even though when I had tried to, I was actually... That's the other thing. So when I was trying to manage or coach team members, they would just go to her, and she would basically undermine me and say, well, that's not a really serious issue, so I'll talk to him about it. And so then she would start telling me, you should really scale back on this. This isn't a big priority. This isn't this. And these are things that were HR 101 things. So I'm talking accountability and attendance and punctuality and project deadline. So it wasn't I was going after people. It was, you're missing too many days,
right,
et cetera. And so she started to undermine in that. And towards the end, then she'd be like, I've noticed that you just approve all this time off for this person. And I'm like, because I don't have a leg to stand on. If I say no, they'll cry to you. And she said, well... And
she'll say, oh, okay. Yeah, all right, she'll let him off.
Exactly. So it just turned into those things. And then it got more aggressive in email. So our one-on-ones, I think she tried to save some of that aggressiveness for emails, but then she would email me in the middle of the night. And I think these are times where she thought to herself, this is when I'm going to get him. But then she would say things in email like, you're really starting to slack on the way that you dress. You're really not performing in terms of this project. And some of it had validity, but it's hidden behind a lot of animosity. Because then there was also emails where she would just say, again, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. You're not doing that part. I would appreciate if you would take that off of your profile. You're not doing that in your role. It's almost like, well, A, I am, but B, also, who are you to critique my LinkedIn?
Right. It just seemed like it was coming from a different angle, right? It wasn't about the business anymore. It wasn't about a project anymore. It was about just trying to get you at something. And so was she doing the same to your peers? So the other members of the team?
So I didn't think so when I was there. I think we all put up a fuss because again, I confided a little bit into some of them, and they would be like, "No, you're doing great and stuff." Come to find out, and this is months after I left the organization, and a couple other people had left as well. They started telling me that they too had faced that, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's just terrible." But I didn't know until after I had left, and so it was a little comforting to know that it wasn't, I wasn't a target necessarily, but it's just disappointing and overall that's just how that was led, that's how the team was being led. If I had known that prior, I probably would not have wanted to accept that role.
Right. Oh, so yeah. So it was people that they'd been managing before.
Yes.
So they'd been doing it for a while. And then when you would say, hey, I got this feedback, and they'd say, no, you're doing fine. But no one would disclose, yeah, she's doing that to me too.
Right.
Okay. So started at 6 months. It escalated. When did you finally realize I cannot be successful? Like I'm suffering, my team's suffering. This isn't good.
Just short of right before a year of being in that role. So probably at the 10-month mark. So it started around 6 months, went on again for 3 or 4 until I got a bit more aggressive. And that's when I had decided that I was going to tender my resignation. And then even my departure was just handled so disgracefully.
I was about to say, what was the reaction, and how did it go down? If you feel comfortable sharing.
I do. I remember, and I had reserved this. I had gone back and forth and deciding whether I was going to resign or not. I had put my feelers out for other roles and was starting to apply at other roles. And I wasn't quite certain whether I was going to leave or not, but I had my last one-on-one with them, and they had started to really tack on. So the emails actually started becoming in person and started to tell me, like, I miss the old Michaelangelo. I miss the way that you were. Now it just seems like you're just showing up to work so unhappy, and it shows in everything that you're doing. And I think that, we're going to have to revisit our pay structure and in terms of this role and position. And I had asked a couple of follow-up questions with that in terms of, do you mean that I'm going to be demoted, or do you think that this role is going to be eliminated? And she said, I don't think you're going to be demoted or eliminated because we need this, but really we're going to consider what your bonus structure is going to be because you're really just not the person we thought you would be.
That's so clear.
It's
right?
so clear.
Yeah.
And up to this, I mean, other than the small things of emails and small things of nitpicking in terms of my team members' attendance, I have had no performance documentation. I have never been coached. I've never given any type of write-up, verbal, or what have you. There was never been any type of coaching that was valid in this. And so at that moment, I was like, I asked for clarity. I was like, I am just trying to understand what you mean by my performance isn't going really well. And she had said, well, you should take a look at that yourself and figure that out. And I was like,
this is preposterous.
Right. I was like, at this moment, I don't think so. So I'm going to resign. I was like, I'm going to put in, my notice, effective 2 weeks from today. And
did you do it on the spot?
I did.
Like with that conversation, knowing that you'd been like, all right, this isn't going to work anyway. But that conversation triggered you to be like,
that was a push off the ledge. And it was the first time in my life I had ever left a role without another position lined up securely. But it was affecting me personally and professionally, and I just didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. So I turned in my notice, and she said thank you and opened her door, and then I just went back to my area and started working, and she didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. She sent me one last email, and that's when then I was like, this was the right decision.
Oh, yeah, beyond the right decision. I mean, that's just to work in that type of environment. It really messes with your head. Like you said, shakes your confidence. You can't effectively lead if you don't have support from your leader, and not just support. Like, that's beyond support. It'd be better if they just ignored you. But this was like actually sabotage, right? So, looking back, I mean, that's obviously not probably the best time in your leadership career. What did you learn about yourself as a leader?
I learned that I am a lot more resilient than I give myself credit for. So at the beginning, again, I felt I just doubted myself. And I let that get into my head of who I was and what I was doing. And again, through the comfort of colleagues and through my mentors, I learned that I am much better than I give myself credit for. So it helped me stay a little bit more confident in things that I'm doing and not really let those things affect me or cloud my mindset.
Would you have done anything differently? If you look back with your wise self now, would you do anything like, oh yeah, I would have done that differently? Or you're like, no, it was what it was.
Unironically, I would have confronted it. So I was so afraid. Again, the comment was, I am aggressive and I am combative. And so I retreated so far back in. But I think that if I had any way to change that or any changes to be made was to have confronted it at the beginning head on of, I don't understand why you're saying this to me. Or please provide me more clarity in terms of what you do consider I'm doing wrong so that we can align and re-correct ourselves rather than letting that shroud my mind and retreat back in. Because I think I'm hopeful that if I had been a little bit more outspoken, that at least I would have found closure either early on, or it would have given us that ability to have a conversation to figure out really if it was a personal confliction, or whether there was just something hidden behind it.
Mm-hmm. And did you say one of the things that, people listening may be like, oh, why, who could you have turned to anyone for help? Because when you're in an organization, and obviously the hierarchy is your boss is the one that is causing the trouble, did you have anyone to turn to? Is there an HR business partners or anyone you can go to? Or is it just no, people, this is the reality of the situation, because that's why we're having this podcast. This stuff happens more than you'd like to think. And did you ever have any kind of recourse to say, hey, this isn't good, I need help, organization?
I wish. I will answer it in two parts.
Okay.
For me personally, there was no one else. I had spoken to my colleague, and for full transparency, I work in the field of human resources. So my leader is an HR professional, and I am an HR professional. And so my colleagues were the HR business partners. And so for me, no, because again, I reported up to the top HR person, who then reported up to our CEO. And so I couldn't go any further up. And so it was very unfortunate. But in any other organization, HR is your friend. HR is there to listen. And that's why I confided into my colleagues, because they were the HR business partner, but also, they were HR and my friend. And so, but because it was our leader, there was very little we can do in that sense. She wasn't breaking the law. Otherwise, my HR compliance and legality would have flown the red flag, and I would have considered saying something then. But in any other normal world, if you are ever put in a situation where you're uncomfortable or your leader seems to be pushing you down, HR is your best friend in that sense. Because HR, although they're there to protect the organization, they're there to protect it from situations from arising or getting much harder or more difficult. Yeah,
well, this is the reality of it, right? You were in the place that you're supposed to call, and that does happen. I won't go into detail about that. Maybe I had a similar experience, but if you had a leader listening that is going through the same thing, or is, may one day be caught in the same situation, what is your advice for them? Because I think what you said earlier is you're when you first get a promotion, you're on the high of the promotion. You are yeah, this is great. New responsibilities, an ego boost. And then you get to work. And so I think too many of us look at it being oh, this fun time. I'm a leader. And now I'm a promoted leader. But really what happens is what we're talking about. So what advice do you have for that person who may be going through something similar?
To find yourself among good people and be able to talk things out with others. Because sometimes you tell yourself a story, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But you definitely need some other ears to be able to let things off of your chest, but also to walk yourself through what is good solutions, or at least some type of solution that you can, find yourself in. Whether, again, that's advice to talk to an HR person, or to know that your worth is there and to leave the organization. Again, it's a good thing that I was surrounded by people who cared about me, cared about my professional career, but also were professionals themselves. So I was able to balance a lot of the conversations I was having with myself with them.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I see often is people staying in it for a while, and then when they finally go somewhere else, and you're oh, it's nice. It didn't have to be that way for even, 6 months to a year. So imagine you being in a better place now. You realize how dysfunctional that was, right?
Absolutely. There is always going to be, if that's not the right situation for you, there will be a right situation. Even if the next one is not it, there is a right situation for you. So don't ever think, because the reason I was going back and forth in my mind whether I wanted to leave or not is the compensation was amazing. It was the best compensation I've had in my professional career. It really helped me set my family up for success. And so I battled with that. And I'm sure a lot of people do, where it's the money's too good. And I essentially did take a pay cut after I did find a role to try to find some peace. But now in my current role, I'm right back up there. So I've now found the balance of an amazing leader, amazing organization, and the right compensation. So all those things do exist. It just happens over time.
Yeah, I like what you said, Michaelangelo, about the pay. Is I get it, honestly. Those, whether it's pay, whether it's golden handcuffs, they'll promise you things that I used to hear a lot of people, well, wait till this next year's bonus. Like there's a lot of things that come in that can keep you there. But can you imagine still being there? Like,
no, oh my goodness, no. I literally, before this, I had a doctor's appointment, and I was able to go to my doctor's appointment. I had lunch at Panera Bread, and I worked from there. And I can't imagine having that peace of mind, knowing that my leader supports me and what I'm doing, and be able to just carry that out. And I'm going to take my son to karate practice in just a little bit.
Wonderful. And I like that you are still leading. Like it didn't shake your confidence enough to say, no, I'm not a good leader. No, I'm going to continue leading. It was just, I wasn't given what I needed to be successful there, moved to a different place, and you're much happier. So anything left you want to add before we finish up today?
Yes, that you are always your best advocate. So like I said, if I could have changed anything, I would have spoken up for myself. I've learned that has served me really well in my most current role of being able to speak who I am, what I need, and that's how I was able to find what I have now. And so you are always your strongest advocate, and never forget that. No one will take care of you like you.
Wonderful advice, Michaelangelo. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Thank you for joining us on Growing Through It. I'm Jen Arnold, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If today's story sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with your fellow leaders. And remember, each episode comes with a nugget of wisdom that we expand on in our newsletter. So if you're eager to put these insights into action, head over to our website at growthsignals.co and sign up for exclusive content that'll give you an edge in your leadership journey. Keep growing, and I'll connect with you again soon in our next episode. Until then, take the lessons learned and lead authentically.